Welcome back to the Mentor Show, which offers quick lessons packaged within minisodes for busy founders and startup leaders like you. I'm Adel, and I'm being mentored live and unscripted by Ed, who's built, sold, turned around, and scaled startups all the way to the New York Stock Exchange. He's based in the US, a developed economy, and I'm based in Dubai, a hub within an emerging economy. And we compare notes. This is real talk, no scripts, no theory. Let's get into it. Let's say, for example, I've been a corporate guy working in a bank, and I wanted to become one of these successful founders who have created companies that lasted 50, 100 years.
It's a good question because it obviously happens frequently where someone in a corporate environment gets fed up with what they're doing and decides they want to try something different. And one of those things is go out and start a company. I guess the first question I would pose to someone like that, let's say it was myself, am I willing to really leave the safety and comfort, perceived safety and comfort of a larger organization? Right now, here in the West, it really almost doesn't matter how large the business is you work for. There's no guarantee that you'll have a job for life. Things change. So mature people know that. But when you work for a larger company, you have access to a lot of resources. You have lots of people you can call on in HR, in accounting, in office support, all sorts of talents in the business you can call on when you need something. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to be scrappy. You have to wear lots of different hats and do each job well enough to keep the business going. So you don't have those resources. Those resources cost money. The other thing is if you're inside a large corporation, and let's say that the corporation is very entrepreneurial itself, they do a lot of startup ideas inside the company. Well, guess what? It's corporate money that tends to start those businesses. So in my earlier example, when Coors, the brewing company, wanted to get into ceramics, that was Coors money that was used to start up that division and then get it to where it ultimately is today. If you're in a startup, you have to be spending your money, right? First, it's coming out of your pocket directly. And when you get a little tired of spending your own money, you go to friends and family and you raise money from them. And after you've tapped out that resource, you go look for money from other investors, venture capital, private equity, other high net worth individual. But my point is that you're taking a big risk. You're leaving the safety of a large organization, and now you're taking on all the risk. Is that something can stomach the risk? Do you have the mindset to wear different hats simultaneously for a long time? So people often ask me when I started my first company, how hard did I work? And I tell them without exaggerating, it was 7 days a week. I worked 7 days a week. And if you don't like that idea, probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur, right? You're also going to have to deal with people, and people have a way of surprising you, both good and bad. If you're not good at confrontation, you have a new skill that you have to learn. If you don't like firing someone, you have a new skill you have to learn. And the list goes on. So anyone making the choice to go from corporate environment to startup should just think about these things, because now you own everything and it is a big risk. And I know people that have made that shift and made money. I know people who have made that shift and lost an awful lot of cash and have been disappointed because they actually thought they could be successful as an entrepreneur. And in fact, that just wasn't their thing. They weren't having fun at it. They didn't enjoy it. And they went back to corporate work.
So if someone wants to consider their chances of leaving into either starting their own business or joining a startup for the equity upside that it brings, what situation would be, other than not being able to stomach the risk, what other signs they have to look for to tell them, you know what, stay where you are?
I'm going to come at that question a little differently than I think we normally have. I would say if you start a business to become rich, you're starting it for the wrong reason. There's no guarantee that you'll be rich, whatever rich means. I think you have to have a belief in yourself. I think you have to have a belief in your idea, and you need to go out to the marketplace and verify that your idea has merit. If the market says, gosh, I love your idea, give me more, and you get excited getting out of bed every day because you can't wait to go to work, then by all means, start a company and see. And be prepared to be disappointed, because I think in the human condition, when you're disappointed, you try harder. When you're disappointed, it gets your ideas going. If you're not prepared to accept failure, be very, very, very careful about becoming an entrepreneur or joining a small company because success is not guaranteed.
Thank you. This is very clear. One last question is on designing for durability, basically designing for scalability, especially in the recent conditions post COVID. There are so many changes. There is AI that's coming in and shifting the whole industries and the way that we work as well. For someone who's leaders who are unprepared, that make the leap of faith when joining a startup or starting a company, what should they think about today with all the information we have? All the inflation, the geopolitical heat, the issues, AI coming in, shifting industries, automating things. Some people might argue that it's a bad time to go and start a company right now. Wait. Some others might say, no, it's perfect. Start now. Get AI first products out. What do you think? What's your advice?
So there's some general themes here that I think maybe speak to a philosophy that I follow. My philosophy is not something that will work for everybody, but my view is in hard times, there's a lot of opportunity. In fact, the worse the times are, probably the better it is to go start a company. When everyone's afraid, get excited. When everyone's excited, start to worry. That's a little takeaway from Charlie Munger from Berkshire Hathaway mindset. When people are greedy, be afraid. When people are afraid, be greedy. Get into the stock market. And here's why I say that. There are things every day that we don't control, but they affect us. War, economic meltdown, acts of nature, things like that. When you start a business, I think there's very broadly two hats you're going to wear. One is the tactical hat about how you run your business, how you hire employees, how you set up for scale operations with the money you have and the revenue you bring in and the profits you generate. It's all the things to keep the wheels on the car and the car moving down the highway smoothly. The second hat you're wearing is strategic. And I'm very careful about the word strategic because people auto-define in their head when they hear the word strategic. They come up with their sense of what it is. Here's my definition. To be strategic, you are looking out away from the business at things that can affect the business. Inflation, recession, war that causes the price of oil to go up, which causes your fuel costs for your delivery up. How do you pass that on or cover that cost and still have a healthy business? So you need to be a voracious reader. You need to pay attention to the news and you need to keep asking yourself, how does this affect my business? Right? If fuel costs go up because of war and you say, well, that doesn't affect me because I don't have a delivery fleet that I'm responsible for. No, but you have a supply chain and the goods that you bring in are going to feel the cost of that fuel increase one way or another. And what's really deceptive is that you might see an increase in fuel costs happen because of let's say a war or a natural disaster, but it may be months before it actually impacts your business directly, right? So there's a lag factor. Are you prepared for the lag factor when it actually hits, when the event hits? So those are the two hats you wear. Tactically to keep your business operating day in, day out in a healthy way, and strategically to anticipate some of the events that are coming your way that you just don't see or expect until it actually impacts you. I'll use a different example besides war and fuel costs, because that people can relate to that. But if you go back during, I'd say COVID and just before COVID, in the United States, I'd actually say in the world, it was hard to hire people. And it was hard to hire people because you had companies like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google couldn't find people fast enough. So they started paying aggressively. And if I'm a startup company looking for a front end or back end engineer, and all I can afford is to pay that person $100,000 per annum, but now I'm competing with Google, Microsoft, Apple, etc., and they're paying 200, I have a problem because now I'm starved for talent and I'm at risk of having good people leave to a more stable environment or what they perceive to be a more stable environment because it's a bigger company. That's an example of exogenous events that if you don't see it coming, you don't start thinking about, gosh, I can't afford to match that salary. What else can I do to keep my people happy? motivated. And it's not, people don't always respond just to money. Yes, money is a motivator, but they do respond to quality of the work environment.
You're absolutely right. Even now, while you were mentioning this, I was thinking about the whole remote work as well. Now you can hire people outside your city, outside your town, and that itself becomes a perk for them as well because they don't need to move to a place that's more expensive. They don't need to take their kids out of school. And if having a remote worker for that position works for you, then that's great. That's happening post COVID because of what happened in COVID.
I'll also look at the other side of that advantage of remote work. If you're building a business and you're building to scale, you've just introduced a new management challenge. How do you manage the remote worker? How do you build a remote work team that stays connected to the business and the purpose of the business? Right. And so I think as we touch on all of these various topics around business, whether it's a startup or a later stage company, or maybe even a more mature company, you can already see that there's an interconnectedness with all of these events that always comes back to people. Do you have the right people in the right role doing things that they enjoy? If you have a remote workforce, how do you manage that? If those people don't want to come into an office, can you build a team? Can you sustain the quality of work? More importantly, can you sustain the camaraderie and the idea exchange? I'll give you an example. So when remote work happened, thank God technology had gotten to the point we are today where the teleconference via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or Google Meetup is now as flawless as it is. We can actually look at each other on the screen and speak in pretty much real time. But there was a behavior during COVID that I think became problematic. People don't like using their camera. If I can't see you, am I actually interacting well with you? If I can't see you, are you checking your email while we're having an important video conference? I mean, you can keep pulling on that string and find that there's a lot of new behaviors that you have to manage if you're going to support remote work. I think remote work is a great aspect of the world we live in today, but it also comes with some pitfalls.
That's it for this minisode. Big thanks to Ed and to all of you for tuning in. If this sparked something, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and make sure you share it within your network. Got a question for Ed? Drop it within the comments. See you next time.
Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions.